In this module, we'll begin to look at what is an informative speech and how do we structure building and creating one. So first, what is an informative speech? Well, you're going to learn that in chapter 14. Now, there are a couple of things that I want you to pay strict attention to as you review and read chapter 14. The first is that as you're reading this chapter, I want you to be thinking about what are you excited about informing our classmates about? Now remember, as you pick your topic, it needs to be timely, so make it something of the moment. For instance, spring 2020, the coronavirus is a very timely topic. It also needs to not be persuasive. So don't think about things like, oh, you should vote, because you can do those later on in this course when we get to our persuasive speeches. It needs to be something you're passionate about. If you don't like sports, well, then don't inform us about sports. But if you love Mr. Rogers, there you go. There's a great topic for you. It also needs to be something that you can support with 3 to 4 sources, and one of those must be academic. Now, if you have any questions about what an academic resource is, Google Scholar is a great resource for you, as is the NSU Library website. Finally, as you're thinking about an informative speech, make sure it's something that relates to your audience. Your audience needs to be able to feel like they care about what you're informing them about. And you'll learn more about how to do that through audience relation as we move through working on our informative speeches. Now that you've learned what an informative speech is, and you've begun to think about what your topic will be, let's work on developing your speech in Chapter 11. Now, this class, we've talked about being an others-oriented communicator. Now that we're going to work on public speaking, we want to be an audience-oriented communicator, focusing on and thinking about the audience. Now, that can be hard to do, especially if you're somebody who struggles with public speaking anxiety, and your textbook in Chapter 11 takes some time to address that. Now, public speaking anxiety can also be known as stage fright, as speaker anxiety, anxiety about speaking in public, and that definition is given for you on page 254. Now, if you struggle with this, know that you're not alone. As your textbook says, one study found that over 80% of us struggle with this. I told you at the beginning of the semester that I have experience as a professional actor. Well, how would you feel if you knew that I also struggle with stage fright? Every time I get up in front of an audience, it's there. It's deep down in here. But you know what I am able to do after years and years and years of practice? I turn that into adrenaline, and I use it to give me more energy as I perform. And the same goes for when I lead a class in a lecture or when I give an academic presentation. And that's something that you can do too. There are a couple of suggestions that your textbook gives, and I want to quickly go through those with you now. The first is that you need to be prepared. Put in the work ahead of time. Don't leave your preparation for the last minute. If you're like my grandfather, who's a handyman farmer, he'll always say, measure twice, cut once. So use that measure time, that preparation, to make sure you're ready to begin the task. The next thing you do is you can consider that audience. Put your focus on their needs, their goals. Think about what they need and what you have to give them. Also, you can focus on your message. If I'm thinking about what I have to tell you, then I'm not thinking about my nerves about what I have to tell you. You can also encourage yourself. You can think positively. You can write great mantras and stick them up. Remember, Katie is enough. You can stick that up somewhere to remind you what you need. And finally, there might not be as much scientific research to say that this is an acceptable tool, but I truly believe in the power pose. So spread those feet hip width apart, hands on hips like Superman, head back, shoulders back in 30 seconds. Okay, that wasn't 34 seconds, but you get the picture. Power pose. I believe that it works. And remember, I'm here for you. You can do this. Welcome to Chapter 12. We're now on stage 6 of the audience-centered speech prep. So congratulations, you've already made it this far. As you work on organizing your speech, There are a couple things that I want to go over for you that will help you be as successful as you possibly can on this assignment. Now, your textbook is going to tell you all about different organizational patterns you can use, and that's wonderful. But no matter what pattern you choose to use, you need to make sure that your outline submission fits the requirements of the assignment. So make sure that it's in APA format. You will need an APA cover page with an appropriate APA header and page number. You do not need an abstract for this assignment. When you move into the body of your outline or the body of your speech, you'll give us the title again at the top. You'll give us an outline format, Roman numerals. Now this needs to be a full sentence outline. I've given you a sample that you can look at. Guess who it's about? Mr. Rogers. And that will help guide you as to what I'm looking for in an informative speech outline. I've also provided a template for you. Perhaps you're not that familiar with APA formatting. Well, this template is already in APA format. You just need to make sure that you add your citations in APA format and your sources on your reference list. Now remember, for an informative speech, we're looking for 3 to 4 sources, 1 academic. When you move on to a persuasive speech, it's 4 to 5 sources with 1 academic. You'll need to make sure those sources are cited in the body of your outline as well as on your references page. Now, if, again, you're not that familiar with APA format, I've given you a link to APA Purdue OWL, and that's a great resource that can help you make sure that you're being as successful as possible with APA formatting. Now, I'm also happy to schedule a Zoom meeting with you to look at any of your work, and you can do that by emailing me to schedule that Zoom meeting. One very important thing I want you to remember. When you present this speech, I don't want you to hold your outline in front of you. So this outline is used to write your speech, but then just like your textbook states, you'll transfer it to note cards or speaker notes that you can reference throughout the speech. Now, I don't want you reading off of your note cards because then I can't see your eyes and you cover up part of your face. We want to focus on extemporaneous speaking in this course. So use those note cards as a reference, or use them when you have to make a direct quotation or you need to remind yourself of where the information came from for a source. Good luck. Method. In Romeo and Juliet, at the beginning of the play, Shakespeare says this play is going to be about 2 hours, people are going to die. Then at various points throughout the play, he tells us that. We see that it's about 2 hours, we see that people die, and then at the very end of the play, Shakespeare comes back out with one of his characters and says, so, it's been about 2 hours, whole lot of people died. He told us what he was going to tell us, he told it to us, and then he told us what he told us. So make sure as you're preparing for your informative speech that you're keeping that in mind. Tell us what you're going to tell us. You'll do that in your introduction. Tell it to us, that's your body, and then tell us what you told us. There's your conclusion. Good luck. Welcome to Chapter 13. You finally made it to the last step of preparing your speech. Congratulations. You've written your speech, you've outlined your speech, you've determined your topic, and it's time to prepare for delivering your speech. There are a couple things I want to highlight from Chapter 13 before you give your final presentation. The first is what I like to call the difference between colorful language, and no, I do not mean cuss words, and basic language. Basic language, it's just what it sounds like. I can say, she drank a cup of water, basic language. Or I can say, she picked up the cup of water and sipped at it like a dog laps from his bowl. Now that paints a much different picture, doesn't it? It's colorful language. Here's another example. As the plane began its descent into the valley, I looked out the window and saw the rolling blue mountains, and they looked like I could fall into them just like they were clouds. The sky was faintly painted with purple and pink, and I knew for the first time in 4 months, I was home. Now, what does that tell you? You don't necessarily know where home is, but it gives you a feeling. We all have a feeling of home, and it reminds you of that. So use colorful language as you prepare to deliver your speech. The next thing I want to remind you about is that it's important that you have good eye contact. Now you might be questioning, how can I have good eye contact because I'm delivering this over a video? Well, as a reminder, you do need to have an audience of at least 10 in the room with you when you deliver this speech, and I need to see them at some point in your video, so make sure you show them to us. But here's a little tip for you. I had a Jonathan Taylor Thomas poster on my wall in the 90s, and it really freaked me out. At one point, I had to move that Jonathan Taylor Thomas poster inside my closet because I felt like he was always looking at me. And here's the reason why. He was looking directly at the camera. So no matter where I moved in my room, I felt like Jonathan Taylor Thomas's eyes were following me. So how can you make eye contact with your audience that's on the other side of a screen? You can look directly at the camera. Now, it can be so easy to look at ourselves on the screen, especially if we see a video of ourselves as we're recording, but try and keep in mind that you want to look at that little green light at the top of your camera to make eye contact. I want you to film this video landscape or wide. I don't want a portrait orientation. Please don't hold your cell phone like a selfie to deliver it. There are some great tips in our presentational speaking how-to document that I've provided you. Now, a great background is something like this. Either a solid wall is great, or something like this that's fairly cluttered and is hopefully not going to draw your eye too much to something. Now, I don't really want to see kitchen counters and household clutter, but something that's very strong and structured, maybe a bookshelf you stand in front of, a wall that's got some pictures on it. Just make sure that there's no glare behind you. And we want to be able to hear you. It doesn't really matter what you're informing us on if we can't hear you. So make sure that you play your video back and you ensure that you have great sound before you submit your video. The very last thing I want to encourage you with is that you've done so much prep work to get yourself here. You know the material, you've put in the hard work, so now trust yourself. Make sure you practice, you get lots of rest, you don't film your video when you're in a hurry, and you trust yourself. Best of luck. I can't wait to see your speeches.